Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning and welcome to another wonderful Sunday morning. Right here at Faith in Our Hometown, we're glad you joined us for another Sunday morning for some conversation, hopefully along with your morning coffee, especially those of you who are joining us very early in the morning. It's always good to spend part of our Sunday morning with you. Poverty is one of those issues that affects us as human beings. And in southern Missouri, the recent poverty report has come out that shows us that the 10 most poverty-stricken counties in the state of Missouri are actually here in southern Missouri. I'm very pleased to have my own boss with me today, Bishop Edward Rice, who's the bishop of the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, which basically scans the whole southern third of the state of Missouri. We're going to be talking a little bit about that poverty report and, again, how we as people might be able to respond to some of those things. So I'll just go pour yourself a good cup of coffee, come back and join us. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. So stick around and we'll be talking with Bishop Rice right after this break.
I was in shock, and in denial, and I couldn't believe it was me. I was healthy, feeling well, but unbeknownst to me, after the colonoscopy, I found out that I had colon cancer. My name is Mario Guerrero. I'm an ethicist. I help people that are in a hospital and the medical staff process some of the difficult situations. In this case, it was the other way around.
Well, I'm glad I caught it earlier.
On my 50th birthday, I had a regular checkup. I wasn't concerned because I felt well. No family history of this type of cancer, and yet I developed this type of cancer. During the process of the colonoscopy, they were able to remove that polyp. And having that done within the hospital setting, they can just address all the issues right there and then. I'm a great believer in early detection. This is such a silent disease, and you really don't necessarily have symptoms. Go get checked. Follow up with your physician. Don't wait.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My boss, Bishop Rice, who assigned, well, he didn't actually assign me here, but he's keeping me here so far, I guess, here at St. Peter's in Joplin and St. Anne's in Carthage. So welcome again, Bishop, to Faith in Our Hometown.
Thank you.
You recently got this poverty report, and you helped pick the topic for today this morning. So why don't you tell us what you found out in the report, and let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's a good report. It comes out every 2 years, and it's called the 2018 Missouri Poverty Report. Pretty straightforward. And it tries to give an overview of how our communities are doing throughout the state of Missouri. Where is there stress? What are some of the issues that we're dealing with? And so it's good. And I just want to begin by maybe reading the beginning paragraph. Poverty is a problem. It's a healthcare problem, a living wage problem, a food insecurity problem, an affordable housing problem. And then it says it's complex.
Oh, yeah.
And it certainly is, just by looking at those issues. It's very hard to pinpoint what we need to do to respond to poverty that's going to kind of quote unquote fix it. Yeah. But we do know all the signs.
Yeah, and I think we've certainly had many different guests on the show that have talked about some of those things. Some about the food insecurity, some of those about, again, how do people make a living wage, those kinds of things. And we've talked about some of those, but again, it is a complex problem, and all kinds of things come to bear on that. So, exactly. You said you told me before we got started that the top 10 that struggle in this area are all in the southern third of the state of Missouri.
Yeah, that's true. That was one of the surprising things from the report. So the top Missouri counties with the highest poverty rate, they're all in southern Missouri. I don't think it would be a surprise that a good number of them are in the Boot Heel.
Right.
Where there's a lot of financial difficulties there. But then even as you move further west, it's just a lot of problems. And then the opposite is also true, that the top 10 Missouri counties with the lowest poverty rate are not in our diocese. So we've got a lot of the poverty and not many of the resources.
And again, for many of our listeners, again, just to remind you that diocese, we use this Catholic terminology, and we're so used to it. But a diocese basically is a set territory that is governed by a bishop and then assisted by all the people that he can get to assist him in that territory. Right. Our diocese runs the southern third of the state of Missouri. And so, our northernmost area here would be, in our viewing area, would be Lamar. Okay, and then when you get to Nevada, then that becomes a different diocese. It's a different territory because those are where the county lines are. So just kind of to fill everybody in to make sure they know what we're talking about. So.
And you had mentioned before, and it's kind of unique because we are the bottom third. So we go from the Kansas-Oklahoma border all the way over, and it includes the Boot Heel, where you have Illinois and Kentucky and all those other states there. And then,
of course, Arkansas across the whole bottom.
Right. So we do not go into Arkansas, but we boundary all those different areas.
Sure.
So we're one church east to west, at least we're striving to be,
Sure.
So when there's poverty in one area, we have to respond to that, and so I think that's the challenge that we face.
Well, and I think that even for us, because two of those 10 areas are right here in our viewing area, which would be McDonald County and Berry County, down in the southwest corner, just south of us. And so, again, I think we'd be hard-pressed to say that, just because we live in Jasper or Newton County, we don't care about what's going on in Berry or McDonald County. I think that's, that's part of the premise of the show is that we ought to be caring about each other and figuring out what we can do to help each other.
Well, when I saw the report, there were two thoughts that went through my mind. Number one, as Catholics, we have a mandate to reach out to the neighbor in need. That's what we do. But also, this report kind of just reinforced that we don't need a double mandate. Our mandate from the Lord is enough to say we need to serve the poor. But this sort of focused it and really highlighted just exactly what we're dealing with. And so for me, it becomes kind of a rally cry to say, what are we doing to help the poor? So one of the things that I had just a couple of weeks ago, we have what is called the St. Vincent de Paul Society, which you're familiar with, but
we actually run one out of St. Mary's Parish here in Joplin. St. Mary's runs one. Yeah.
Shout out to St. Mary's in Joplin. St. Vincent de Paul Society, it's a group of individuals that volunteer their time to help the poor. And so we had a gathering of all 9 of these groups. And so that goes from basically Cape Girardeau all the way over to Joplin. And the challenge that I gave to them was, how are we responding to this report? Okay. And then to go from there and say, well, that's just 9 conferences. What about our individual parishes? Because I think you have a program at your parish, don't you?
Yeah,
you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think our viewers probably have heard me, talk about it at least in reference before. But we were on the Outreach House out of St. Peter's, which is our individual, basically, if you will, kind of a soup kitchen. It's kind of like your basic lunch counter, if you will. And we serve meals 3, sometimes 4 days a week. We get to the end of the month, we serve on Sunday as well. Again, just to help people to stretch if they need that to the end of the month, where the dollars are tight. But anybody that wants to eat, anybody that's hungry on any of those days, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Sunday, is welcome to come to St. Peter's Outreach House, which is at 8th and Moffett, and have a meal.
So one of the little things that this report used, the phrase was food insecurity. Actually, until I read the report, I guess I've heard that term before, but it's kind of new, I think, to a lot of people to say food. What does that mean? It says that, by the end of the month, their resources are stretched and there's no food in the pantry. There's nothing in the refrigerator. And so what do they do? Because the end of the month is when it gets difficult.
Right.
And so you can call it food insecurity or just end of the month, it's tight.
Or some people, and not even people who might not even be on food, public assistance, or, those kinds of things, are, receiving food vouchers. Okay, SNAP, which we call it now.
SNAP.
But even those that are not doing that, even if a regular paycheck might, from time to time, get stretched. You get paid every 2 weeks, and you're buying groceries for the families, and you might get to the end of that second week, and when you're right before the next paycheck, and you still be running low.
Well, there's a term for that too. It's called the working poor. These are good, hardworking people that they might be getting what we consider a living wage, but it may not be a family wage, and there's a difference in that, when you have children. So what might be a wage for me as an individual to live on is not going to help when you have a spouse and a couple of kids. So the difference between a living wage or a family wage, and then, you're right, it's the working poor who they're doing their best. Sometimes they're working 2 or 3 jobs, and at the end of the month, it's still tight.
Yeah.
And then where do you turn? Now, you brought up the whole issue about the SNAP program, which is true, and currently there's some legislation looking at that to say, how can we tighten it up so that the people that really deserve it, and will get it. But then when you do that, a lot of people fall through the cracks as well. Yeah. I'm all for transparency when it comes to these types of programs and assisting the poor. Right. I think we all are. We want to make sure that the assistance that is needed gets to the right people. But when you do that, sometimes innocent people are hurt by that.
And again, a lot of times the ones who are really hurt are the kids. I will say that, certainly I think that one of the things that has always resonated with the folks who, like, for example, support our food pantry, the outreach house, those who support Cross Lines, those who support, Salvation Army, all of our food, sharing groups here in Joplin at least, and in many of the other outlying areas as well, those food pantries, is that everybody's definitely concerned because they don't want the kids to suffer just because somebody else maybe is struggling as well. But we certainly don't want kids going hungry, not having enough food, to fill their bellies.
That's the other thing, and probably your viewers know this, and it's not just in the state of Missouri. The face of poverty across the United States is female and it's children. They are the bulk of those who go hungry. And that's heartbreaking when you think that we live in a country that has so much, that the amount of food that we waste in the course of a year could feed the hungry.
Sure.
So it's a real challenge.
Yeah. And again, how do we distribute it better? How do we share a little bit better? And again, these are very complex issues, complex problems with how to do that. Because again, I don't think I would just, none of our viewers I know would, willfully just want to throw something away so that nobody else can have it. But how does that even work? How do I get my excess to somebody else? How do we, as a country, sometimes when we produce the excess, how do we still pay our farmers for that and still then get it to some of the people who need it? And it really becomes, because it's like when you start picking at that huge ball of yarn, you start getting one piece out and starting to pull it out, and you find out how tangled so much of it is.
But you know what? Although it is tangled, we still need to have the conversation, because ultimately, people are going to bed hungry.
Yeah.
And again, it's female and it's child.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that are carrying the brunt of the hunger. Yeah. So you brought up, there are a lot of tangled issues. That's why, at least in our Catholic tradition, we have people in Jefferson City who lobby for these issues. We have the 4 bishops of the state of Missouri have what is called the Missouri Catholic Conference. We actually have people that lobby for these issues. So I brought up before when we talked about what does it mean to have a living wage or affordable housing. These are all issues that impact poverty. So people might say, well, why is the Catholic Church involved in housing? Well, that's one of the factors for hunger. Educational programs, after-school programs, these have an impact for good, or if you take it away, for bad when it comes to poverty. People that are right on the edge, the working poor, it has an effect in their lives. Yeah. So that's why we have to advocate for these issues. The reality is, however, people can't eat a piece of legislation. That's why we also need our food outreach programs.
Yeah. Well, we're talking this morning with Bishop Ed Rice, who's the Bishop of Southern Missouri, or the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, the Catholic Bishop of Southern Missouri. We have been talking a little bit about the poverty report, and we're going to continue right after a real short break. So go ahead and fill those coffee cups and come back and join us.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, thanks for sticking with us this morning. My guest again, Bishop Ed Rice, who is the bishop here of the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, which comprises the southern third of the state of Missouri. My boss, just so if any complaints, there you go. You know who to complain to now. But we've been talking about poverty and the poverty report, and during the break we were just kind of mentioning a little bit what is the poverty rate now in the state?
The statewide poverty rate is 14%. So there'll be 14% of our population qualifies to be designated as poverty or below, okay? Yeah. The sad thing
So-
is when it comes to children, it's 19.2%.
Yeah.
So that's when I said before, it's often women and children that suffer the brunt of this. There's absent fathers. The woman, the mother, is trying to keep the kids together at home, doing it all by herself. You know, that's the face of poverty.
Yeah. So what do we do? How do we help?
Well, I mentioned before. First, we do have to have advocacy programs. You know, that's why we have the Missouri Catholic Conference lobbying for different issues in Jefferson City. And then the other side of it is, what do we do for on hands responding to people? So somebody had asked me, what is my vision for the diocese? And I said, my vision for the diocese is that every parish, and we have 66 parishes and 18 missions, but for every parish to have some type of an outreach program to respond to the local needs that people have, okay? So,
And again, it is really important that that's done locally too, because what works for us here in Jasper and Newton County may not work necessarily in McDonald or Berry County.
Exactly, exactly. Or when we go over to the boot heel, and that's a whole different experience over there. So my goal is to have an outreach program or some type of a food program, a pantry, whatever it might be, in every one of our parishes. So we already mentioned we have these 9 St. Vincent de Paul conferences, which is great. One of them is located here at St. Mary's in Joplin.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We also said sometimes a parish can't do all of that, but they can maybe cooperate with another local denomination, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4 parishes or churches can sponsor a food pantry.
I'll give a little shout out, for example, to Neosho. Neosho operates with several of the other churches there in their area. Also give a shout out over to Pittsburgh, because a few weeks ago we were talking to the folks who run God's Diner over there. And again, lots of people banding together in the Pittsburgh area doing the same thing, trying to somehow provide some food, some meals to some of the folks who might be hungry otherwise.
And so the reality for our diocese, our area, the bottom third of the state, the Catholic presence is not real strong because we're a small percentage of the general population. But I tell our people we can never use that as an excuse to do nothing. So we have to partner with the Assemblies of God or the Lutherans or the Baptists and say, whatever the town is, how are we responding to the needs? Especially hunger, to think that a child goes hungry at night, that should keep us up at night. It really should.
And that's what I say, it's so easy sometimes to step back from all of it and go, well, I don't know anybody who's hungry. But that's one of the reasons why I keep telling everybody, get involved. And you'll start to meet some of the people who are hungry. And when they've got faces and they got names, it bothers you a whole lot more than when it's just, well, those people over there. When I know that person's name and I know that person's face and I know those people's kids, it has a completely different feeling to it.
Well, and I'll tell you, part of my personal experience in working at the soup kitchen up in St. Louis before I was sent down here, I would take our seminarians every Tuesday. I did that for 22 years. And you know what I found? I saw kids raised at the soup kitchen, and that's sad. I saw them week after week after week. I saw them year after year after year. I saw kids that grew up at the soup kitchen.
Yeah. And
again, it's sort of it's a scandal to think that a country of our wealth and all that we have material at our fingertips, that we would have such a significant population doing without.
Yeah.
When it really shouldn't be. So part of, you said, what can we do? So we do have that arm that's trying to advocate in Jefferson City. We have our 66 parishes, and I'm challenging them to the Paul Conference or cooperate with another denomination and have a food pantry or some type of outreach. And we also have the reality that a lot of our groups are working hard. We can't ask them to work any harder, but we can ask them to work smarter. And so we have this meeting coming up actually with the Ozark Food Bank. So the Ozark Food Bank is a national program, and actually in the state of Missouri, they cover every county. So in our area, it's called Ozark Food Bank. Over in the Cape Side, it's called the Southeast Missouri Food Bank. But the northern part and the central part of Missouri is all covered as well with the different programs. And they tell us that if I were to take $1 and go to the local store and buy something, a can of corn, that if we go through the food bank, we get $10 more bang for our buck.
Right. Which is why many of our pantry situations, I know I know that Crosslines gets food from Ozark Food Pantry. Certainly St. Peter's Outreach does. I would absolutely be shocked if Salvation Army didn't. I mean, any of those groups that are doing some of those things, I think we've learned how to partner with those folks, because again, they wind up with stuff that folks might be discontinuing or in bulk or those kinds of things, and that's why they can pass it on to us at a 10-to-1 ratio.
Right.
We can buy a lot more food from them than we could if we were going to just one of the local grocery stores. And I want to give a little shout out in some ways too to our local groceries and some of our restaurants and food vendors. I think that we've got some phenomenal people in this community, and I've never discussed with them. I shouldn't say any of their names, so I won't say any of them. But what I am saying is that rather than throw some of their stuff away that reaches right there on the edge of its freshness date, or if it's day-old bread or pastries or some of those kinds of things, we've got some local folks that partner with all of our food agencies, and they'll call us. We go by and pick up something that they may not be able to sell for full price the next day, but that's the kind of generosity. But rather than just throwing it away, they can give it to us, and we can pass it on to somebody who doesn't mind eating a day-old bagel.
Well, I don't mind eating a day-old bagel.
Yeah, exactly, but I'm just saying we can do
Dip
that.
it in coffee,
and do
it makes,
and we can do those kinds of things. And I think we've got some wonderful partners here in our community in terms of some of our grocery stores and in terms of, our restaurants and things like that who provide food for the community. They do a phenomenal job of sharing again with some of their brothers and sisters, and I just want to give them a little kudos while we're on the air today, because we never thought to mention it before.
Sure, and I think the people down here in southern Missouri are so good, and I think what you just said that happens in Joplin, you'll find that repeated throughout southern Missouri.
Exactly.
Because I think people know the reality, and the thought of throwing food away when they know somebody in their community is going hungry. Yep. That again, it breaks your heart when you think about something like that. And so, what you just said, I think, is multiplied throughout the southern part of our state, and people want to help and make a difference. Yeah. And so that's what we're trying to do. And again, I said too that we already have a mandate from our Lord, but this is another mandate to say, okay, let's look at what we're doing.
Yeah, we don't take many mandates from the state, but every once in a while, when they're compelling, we'll listen, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it goes hand in hand with what we believe as people of faith.
It does, yeah. And we can accomplish much more when we're together, when we cooperate with each other. So, the fact that we have the top poorest and then we have none of the wealth, that just kind of highlights the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. And the have-nots, it's the face of it's female and it's child, and that shouldn't be in our state. So we've made some great strides, but the challenge is still there. So when you look at, you had brought up the whole idea of SNAP, and the government assistance, and every once in a while you'll get somebody who said, we need to make sure it's going to the right people. We need to tighten up the program. But sometimes when you do that, it does have a negative effect.
Right, and again, I don't think, Missouri is definitely conservative in this way. And I think it's part of why we're kind of tough and resilient, is we want to make sure it's going where it's really going to be used. We don't want anybody gaming the system. We don't want anybody taking advantage of us. Nobody likes that.
Yeah.
And so we do want some accountability. We do want, people to really try and work and, try to fish themselves rather than just always being handed the fish. And I think, we get all that.
Yeah.
But I do think that, again, I would rather err on the side of maybe not tightening it so much that we hurt more people along the way.
Yeah.
I still look at paying taxes as kind of a sacred trust, and nobody likes to do it. But when I stop and think that if my taxes can go to some of those things, I want them to be well spent.
Sure.
But even knowing that they're well spent, I would hate to to eliminate some of the people who really need it, and so I always usually come down on that end too.
Well, again, in our Catholic tradition, we have Saint Vincent de Paul, who worked with the poor, and it was a great
societies,
quote.
but the man who lived
the
back
actual
in France.
man, Saint Vincent de Paul, who started working with the poor in France in the 17th century. He said, for every 9 people that's going to take advantage of you, let them take advantage of you, because that 10th one is the one that needs it, and you don't know which one of those is that 10th one. Yeah. So 9 times out of 10, you might be taken advantage of. but you do it anyway because the 10th person is the one that really needs it. And that shows, I think, great insight.
Well, I'm going to quote another one of the people that works for you. And basically, the statement has been made that when you are in the business of doing charity and loving people, nobody can really take advantage of you.
Yeah, right.
I mean, they really can't.
Yeah.
If what we're doing is being done out of love, yeah, I mean, I realize that some people may not need it as much as others, but I mean, are we really, really being taken advantage of? Okay, maybe in here and there. But for the most part, I agree that I would rather, I don't want to always be be the judge of how that's going to happen or how that's going to work. Again, my guest this morning, Bishop Ed Rice, who is the bishop here in Southern Missouri. Thank you for joining us again this morning. We're going to have you on again in a couple weeks to talk about a different topic. But we've been talking about poverty and how that affects us here in Joplin and in Southern Missouri and indeed in the whole state of Missouri. So we hope that this has been a little enlightening for you. We're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute. So be sure to stick around, don't go away, and we'll be back up for our wrap up then.
When they discovered there was no hospital, the Sisters of Mercy built one, as they had so many times before, offering healing and hope on the edge of the frontier. Mercy continues to answer the same call to bring care wherever you or your child need it most. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy. In Ireland, the first Sisters of Mercy were called the Walking Sisters because every day they went out in search of women and children who needed healing or help. Mercy continues to answer the same call, dedicated to the health of every woman who comes to us for care. Mercy, in every era, your life is our life's work. Learn why we serve at mercy.net/legacy.
Well, we're grateful that you joined us for another Sunday morning. Our topic this morning has been poverty here in our area, and what does the reality look like, how complex it is, how do we try to approach it in the ways that we respond as people of faith here in our greater Joplin area. So we're glad that you joined us for that. I do hope that you enjoy some of these commercials that you've been seeing the last few weeks, those legacy commercials, the legacy of the Sisters of Mercy. We're grateful to Mercy, who's our sponsor, who continues to help to foot the bill for our show. We're grateful that they continue to do that, and then we're passing on that legacy, as did the Sisters of Mercy, of saying, how do we care for those who are less fortunate among us? That's why they came to this area to teach first at St. Peter's. And then when those sisters saw that they needed hospital care, they invited the nursing sisters to come to the area. And that's the legacy, part of the legacy that we leave here as a church. So join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown. Have a great Sunday, and God bless.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.